The gravy was still warm when she said it. Her voice cut through the clinking of forks and soft chatter like a blade. You always need money, don't you? For a second, the laughter around the Thanksgiving table froze mid-air. My nephew's spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. My brother-in-law coughed softly, pretending not to hear. The candles flickered, and the smell of roasted turkey suddenly felt heavier, almost suffocating. Before you skip, this story will remind you why silence can be the most powerful revenge. Watch till the end, because sometimes peace hurts louder than payback. I looked up at her. My sister. Same eyes, same blood, but a mouth sharper than any knife in the drawer. She didn't look at me with love. She looked at me like I was something beneath her heels. I didn't answer. I just reached for the cranberry sauce and passed it down the table, my hands steady even though my heart had stumbled. That's the thing about age. You learn that silence can scream louder than words. The dining room felt smaller with every passing second. Her husband shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat as if that would erase the venom hanging between us. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator in the next room, the ticking of the wall clock, the little sounds people notice only when no one dares to speak. She laughed lightly, twisting her gold bracelet, the one I helped her buy last Christmas. I mean, don't get me wrong, she added, voice sugar-coated. We all hit hard times. But some of us manage better than others. Her words danced around the table, pretending to be polite. But everyone knew what she meant. She wanted me small, grateful, dependent. I looked at her perfect manicure, at the way she flaunted her success like armor. She didn't know that the roof over her head, her daughter's tuition, even her shiny SUV, all quietly lived on my monthly transfers. I had carried her life while she mocked mine. The others tried to restart the conversation. Someone mentioned football, someone else the pie in the oven. But her smirk stayed fixed, satisfied with her little performance. I didn't give her the show she wanted. That I smiled. Just a soft, practiced smile, the kind that hides thunder behind calm skies. That smile was my first move. Later that evening, when dessert came out, she poured herself another glass of wine. Her laughter grew louder, more careless. She leaned toward her husband and said, "You know, not everyone understands how to manage money." I heard it. Everyone did. Even the children looked up, sensing something was wrong. I folded my napkin neatly and placed it beside my plate. "You're right," I said, my voice steady. "Not everyone does." Our eyes met across the table, hers glittering with arrogance, mine calm, unreadable. For the first time I saw it clearly. Her insults weren't about me. They were about the comfort she thought she controlled. I stood to clear the plates. My son's wife reached to help, whispering, "You okay, Mom?" "I'm fine," I said softly, carrying the empty dishes to the sink. "I've never been better." In the kitchen, away from the others, I let my smile fade. The window reflected my face. Older, yes, but strong. My hands shook slightly as I turned on the faucet. Not from anger. From restraint. Because right there, while the water ran and the laughter carried on behind me, I took out my phone. I scrolled to the banking app, one rarely used during family gatherings. The familiar list of automatic transfers appeared. 5 of them. Rent. Utilities. Tuition. Difference. Groceries. Every month like clockwork. I stared at the numbers for a long second, the same way one looks at a wound before deciding to finally close it. Then I pressed cancel. Once. Twice. 5 times. It was done. No ceremony, no warning. Just a quiet end to years of thankless giving. I returned to the dining table as if nothing had happened. My sister was mid-story about her latest shopping trip. How the store manager had offered her exclusive deals because she was such a loyal customer. The irony almost made me laugh. I poured myself some coffee instead. But no sugar. The bitterness matched the night. Her daughter, my niece, showed off her new phone, the one her mother claimed she saved up for. I smiled. I remembered paying that installment last month. I wondered how long it would take before the service was cut. It wasn't cruelty. It was correction. "Mom, you should try Aunt Linda's pie," my niece chirped. I nodded, forked a bite and said, "It's lovely." My sister smiled, smug again, as if sweetness could wash away her venom. I leaned slightly toward her and said quietly, "You know, it's funny how life changes when people stop depending on others." Her smile twitched just for a moment. She wasn't sure what I meant, but something in my tone made her shift in her seat. She brushed it off, returning to her laughter. I didn't explain. Not yet. Some lessons deserve silence before thunder. When the evening ended, everyone hugged goodbye at the door. My sister's perfume lingered long after she left, strong, expensive, and hollow. She hugged me lightly, almost pretending. Take care of yourself, she said. Oh, I plan to, I replied, holding her gaze. I really do. She didn't notice the weight behind those words. He never did. He believed kindness was weakness. She'd find out soon enough that it wasn't. That night, after everyone had gone, I sat alone in my living room. The clock read 11:47 p.m. The dishes were done, the leftovers packed away, but my mind replayed her voice again and again, that cruel tone wrapped in laughter. I thought of all the times she'd called me crying, asking for help. The times I'd stayed up late wiring money, skipping my own needs just to keep her life from falling apart. Not anymore. The soft glow of my phone screen lit the room. One unread message blinked. Payment failed. Please check your account. A small, satisfied sigh escaped me. I knew there'd be more by morning. I went to the window and looked out at the quiet street. The moonlight fell on the frost-tipped grass, turning everything silver. I wrapped my shawl around my shoulders and whispered to myself, "You always need money, don't you?" The words didn't sting anymore. They sounded almost poetic. The final line of a chapter one was ready to close. Somewhere deep down, I knew what I had done wasn't revenge. It was restoration. I wasn't taking anything from her. I was simply returning what was mine. Peace. By morning, the messages began to pile up. Her name flashing again and again. First cheerful, then confused, then frantic. I didn't answer. Not yet. My tea brewed slowly as I watched the screen light up with her calls. Each buzz felt like a heartbeat of long-delayed justice. When I finally picked up her last message, I didn't open it. I simply placed the phone face down and walked to the porch. The air was cold, sharp, and honest, like the kind of truth that cuts deep but heals clean. For the first time in years, I felt light, unburdened. Later that afternoon, my son dropped by with groceries. He noticed my calmness before I said a word. "Mom, you seem different today," he said. I smiled. Maybe I finally learned how to stop feeding ungrateful mouths. He laughed softly, thinking I was joking. I wasn't. That evening, I sat by the fireplace, knitting a scarf I'd promised to finish months ago. The flames flickered, gentle and golden. I thought about how small moments, one sentence, one decision, could shift the balance of an entire family. And I thought of her face when her world would start to crack open. Rent overdue, tuition unpaid, bills stacking like her pride. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because sometimes people don't understand kindness until they lose it. The hum of the phone filled the quiet room again. Another message. I didn't look. Not yet. I took a deep breath and smiled, whispering the same line she once threw like a weapon. Only this time it belonged to me. "You always need money, don't you?" Her words still echoed faintly in my mind as I sat beside the fireplace the next morning, knitting half-forgotten stitches into a scarf that suddenly felt like the start of a new life. The phone rested face down on the coffee table, silent now. For a moment, I thought the quiet would bring peace. It didn't. It brought awareness. Awareness of how much noise she used to fill my days with. The late-night calls, the dramatic sighs, the endless, "I just need it for a week." I took a slow sip of tea, the faint taste of chamomile and honey settling my nerves. The clock ticked in steady defiance of the chaos I knew was unraveling miles away. My phone buzzed once, a short vibration that slid across the wooden surface like a warning. I didn't move. When it buzzed again, longer this time, I finally flipped it over. 3 missed calls. 2 messages. Her name glared at me like a stain. I opened the first text. "Hey, did the transfer bounce? Maybe your account's having issues again." A smile tugged at my lips. As if I were the one with the problem. By afternoon, her tone had changed. "Mom's worried. Call her. Please tell me you didn't cancel the tuition payment. The school called." I locked the screen and set the phone down. I didn't owe her explanations. The silence between us wasn't punishment. It was preservation. Outside, a soft drizzle began tapping against the window. The scent of rain on the old wooden porch mixed with the faint aroma of stew simmering in the kitchen. I had cooked too much as always, but for once I didn't feel the urge to pack a portion for her. That instinct, mothering everyone who hurt me, had finally died last night. I thought about calling my mother just to stop her worrying, but then I remembered. She never truly worried about me. Her sympathy always belonged to the louder one. My sister had the kind of voice that filled rooms and turned every story in her favor. I was the quiet one, the sensitive one, the one who forgave too easily. Not anymore. That evening I received another call, this time from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. "Hello. Is this Mrs. Thompson?" a polite female voice asked. "Yes. This is Nancy from Westview Academy. We tried reaching your sister regarding her daughter's tuition. She mentioned you handled payments. We're just confirming, was there a change in arrangement?" I took a breath and chose my words carefully. "Yes, there's been a change. She'll be managing it herself now." A short pause followed. "Understood, ma'am. We'll note that." The call ended. I sat in the quiet again, the click of the call disconnecting feeling like the soft closing of a chapter. The next morning the storm began, metaphorically and literally. Rain hammered the roof as my phone lit up again. "How could you do this? I have bills due today. You know I was counting on you. You're seriously letting me drown?" Each message arrived like thunder. I read them all without replying. Every word she sent was proof that she had mistaken my kindness for a contract. When she finally called, I let it ring 3 times before answering. Her voice was sharp, breathless. "Did you cancel everything?" "Yes." "Why? You know I'm behind. I told you I'd pay you back." "You said that for 5 years," I replied, my tone even. "So now you're punishing me? After everything I've done for you?" That made me laugh, quietly, bitterly. "What exactly have you done for me, dear?" There was silence on the other end. For once she had no script ready. "You think this makes you strong?" she snapped finally. "It just makes you cruel." "No," I said, my voice calm. "It makes me free." I hung up before she could respond. After that, the silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was electric. It buzzed through the house like static before a storm. Every knock on the door, every car passing by made my heart skip for a second. Not because I feared her anger, but because I was preparing for something bigger. The shift. Because when you take power away from someone who's lived off it, they don't fade quietly, they scramble. 2 days later, my mother showed up unannounced. She stood in my doorway, clutching her purse like a shield. "I just came to talk," she said, though her tone already carried judgment. I invited her in. She looked around, inspecting the tidy living room as if searching for evidence of guilt. "Your sister's in trouble," she began. "She says you cut her off without warning." I stirred sugar into my tea slowly. "Did she also tell you how long I've been paying her bills?" "She's had a rough year." "She's had a rough decade," I said quietly. "And I've carried every bit of it." Mother sighed. "You always take things so personally." That made me smile. "That's the problem, isn't it? I take care of people personally. They take advantage professionally." She didn't answer. She just looked tired. Maybe older than I remembered. When she finally left, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. It wasn't rebellion. It was self-respect. The silence stretched for days. No calls, no apologies. Just quiet. Until one evening while I was reading by the fire, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, I found a small envelope on the porch. No note, no signature, just my sister's handwriting scrawled on the back. "Return to sender." Inside was a check I'd written her months ago, uncashed. It wasn't worth much, but it carried meaning. Maybe pride, maybe spite. I didn't know which. I set it on the table beside my cup of tea and whispered, "Good. Keep it." That night the house felt bigger. Every room seemed to breathe easier without her chaos echoing through it. But peace, I've learned, is never quiet for long. The next day my niece called. Her voice was small, trembling. "Aunt Linda? Mom said you're mad at her. Did we do something wrong?" The next morning I woke to a softer kind of quiet. Not the heavy silence that used to follow hurt, but something gentler, like a house finally exhaling after years of holding its breath. The sunlight crept through the curtains, painting thin gold lines across the floor. For a moment I thought the world had finally agreed to leave me alone. I was wrong. At exactly 8:17 the doorbell rang. A long, uncertain chime, not the kind neighbors use when they come by for sugar. I froze mid-step, one hand still on the teapot. Something in that sound felt hesitant, familiar. Through the small window beside the door, I saw a blur of dark hair and a pale blue coat. She was standing there, my sister. Her car was parked crooked in the driveway, door half open as if she hadn't even decided whether to stay. I didn't rush. I let her stand there a moment longer, let the morning air wrap around her pride. When I finally opened the door, the smell of rain drifted in, damp pavement, wet leaves, and her perfume faint but still expensive. Her eyes were swollen. She looked smaller than I remembered, her confidence chipped at the edges. "Can we talk?" she said quietly. I stepped aside without a word. She entered the house like someone walking into a memory, cautious, unsure of where to put her feet. Her gaze landed on the framed pictures on the wall, the same ones she used to mock. "You really still keep all these?" she said, half smiling. I didn't answer. I motioned toward the kitchen. "Tea." She nodded, setting her purse down. Her hands trembled slightly as she sat. When I brought the cup to her, she took it with both hands like someone clinging to warmth. For a minute, neither of us spoke. The rain tapped lightly against the window. The clock ticked. It felt almost peaceful until she said, "I think you've made your point." My chest tightened, but my face stayed calm. "My point?" She looked up, her mascara faintly smudged. "You canceled everything. The rent, the car, Emily's tuition. I get it. You're angry." I stirred my tea slowly. Angry is not the word I'd use. "Then what would you call it?" "Done." She flinched as if that word had teeth. "I know I said some things at Thanksgiving," she began, her voice low. "But you took it too far. We're family. You don't just cut someone off like that." I leaned back, studying her. "You mean the way you've been cutting me down for years?" She blinked, taken aback. "It wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that," I interrupted gently. "Every joke at my expense. Every time you called me needy, weak, too soft. You wanted me small so you could feel tall." She looked away, biting her lip. "You always twist things to make yourself the victim." That line, I'd heard it 1,000 times before. But this time it didn't pierce. It passed through me. I smiled faintly. "Maybe. Or maybe you just can't stand that I finally stopped playing the role you wrote for me." Her fingers tightened around the teacup. The clink of porcelain echoed in the quiet room. "Look, I'm not here to fight," she said, exhaling. "I came because I'm in trouble. The landlord gave me 3 days. Emily's school is threatening to drop her. I can't catch up that fast." Her voice cracked. She wasn't pretending now. For the first time I saw real panic behind the arrogance. It should have made me feel good, vindicated even. But it didn't. It just made me tired. "You always had time to mock me," I said softly. "But never time to learn how to stand on your own." Tears welled in her eyes. "Please, Linda, just this once. Just this once." The same phrase I'd heard for 5 years. "Do you know how many times you've said that?" I asked. She shook her head, eyes down. 32, I said. "I counted once. You called me 32 times asking for help, each one the last. You always said you'd pay me back." Her lips trembled. "I meant to. But you didn't," I said. "Because you never had to." For a long moment, the only sound was the rain outside and the faint whistle of the kettle still cooling on the stove. I wanted to feel pity. I wanted to reach across the table like I used to and tell her it was going to be all right. But something deeper stopped me. The memory of that Thanksgiving smirk, the years of quiet humiliation, the sleepless nights spent wiring her money while she called me weak. I set my cup down and looked her straight in the eye. "You told me not to rely on anyone. I learned fast." She blinked back, tears trying to hold her pride together. "So that's it? You're just done?" "Yes." She stood slowly, wrapping her coat tighter around herself. "I didn't realize you could be so cold." I smiled, not out of cruelty but clarity. "Neither did I." At the door she paused. "You'll regret this, you know," she whispered. "I already did," I said. "For years." The door closed quietly behind her. I stood there for a while, listening to her footsteps fade down the walkway, swallowed by the rain. When I finally turned away, something inside me loosened. The house felt heavier for a moment, and then lighter, as if it had been waiting for me to let her go. That night I found myself unable to sleep. The image of her tear-streaked face hovered in the dark. I wasn't made of stone. Forgiveness had always come too easily to me. But forgiveness without change was just an invitation to repeat the same pain. Around midnight I got up and made a cup of warm milk. The house creaked softly, the kind of old, familiar noises that once made me feel lonely but now sounded like company. On the counter sat a small envelope she'd left behind. I hadn't noticed it earlier. My name, written in her rushed handwriting. Inside was a folded piece of paper, a receipt for the jewelry she'd pawned last week. The amount barely covered 1 month's rent. Scrawled at the bottom were 3 words, "I tried, Linda." For the first time that night I felt my throat tighten. She had tried, maybe not enough, but she had. And that small effort, clumsy as it was something she'd never done before. I placed the paper gently in the drawer next to my checkbook. Not to forget, but to remind myself that mercy didn't always mean surrender. The next few days were quiet again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one had weight, the kind that follows confrontation. I went about my chores, folded laundry, watered the plants, and let my mind breathe. Still, at odd hours, I found myself glancing at the window, half expecting her car again. It never came. But one morning as I stepped outside to get the mail, I saw her across the street. Sitting in her car, staring at the steering wheel. She didn't look up. For a second I considered going to her. Then I remembered the look in her eyes at my door. Not just desperation but blame. The kind that waits for one more chance to twist the knife. I went back inside without waving. That evening I called my mother. I told her we'd spoken. "She said you were cruel," Mother said softly. "I was honest," I replied. "Maybe it's the same thing." "Maybe," I said, smiling faintly. "But honesty doesn't drain your bank account." Mother sighed. "You two will come around. Sisters always do." I didn't answer. Some relationships mend. Others just settle into truth. Later that week I found a voicemail from my niece. Her young voice cracked as she said, "Mom's been crying a lot. She said she misses you." I sat in my chair holding the phone like it was made of glass. I wanted to believe her. Maybe my sister did miss me. Or maybe she missed the comfort my name used to bring to her bills. Still, I recorded a message back, careful and kind. "Tell your mom I hope she's taking care of herself. And tell her I'll always love her, just from a little farther away." It wasn't forgiveness. But it was peace. That night, I sat again by the window. The same place I'd stood so many nights wondering why she couldn't love me without needing something in return. Now I understood. Some people only know love when it costs someone else. I looked out at the moonlight glinting off the wet street and whispered, "I hope she learns before the world teaches her harder than I did." Then I closed the curtains and let the house go still. For the first time in years I slept without waiting for a phone to ring. I slept through the night, not deeply but without waiting for the phone to ring. The morning light broke through thin curtains, landing across the rug in quiet stripes. I sat up slowly, listening to the small hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floorboards, and the faint birdsong outside. The world kept moving even when people didn't. I made tea and stared at the steam curling upward, thinking about her. My sister sitting in that car across the street, hands gripping the steering wheel like she was holding onto the last bit of her pride. She hadn't come back since. Maybe she wouldn't. Maybe she'd finally learned what I had known for a long time, that some silences mean survival. Still, I couldn't help wondering what her days looked like now. Did she wake up early, hoping for another miracle deposit? Did she check her phone, waiting for the buzz that would never come? I'd been the background music of her life for so long that my absence must have sounded deafening. I poured the tea into a chipped mug, the one she once said looked too old-fashioned. I smiled faintly and carried it to the window. Outside, the street was still wet from last night's rain. The mailbox glistened, a robin hopped across the fence, and life, simple, indifferent life, went on. By mid-morning, the quiet broke again. The landline rang, a sound I hadn't heard in weeks. It wasn't her. It was Mother. "I just spoke to your sister," she said, her voice careful, like someone stepping across ice. "She's not doing well." Kept my tone even. Define not doing well. "She sold her jewelry. The nice ones your father gave her. She says she's thinking about moving in with me for a while." I stirred my tea with slow precision. "Then she'll be fine. She always lands on her feet." Mother hesitated. "She says you've turned into a stranger." I laughed softly. Maybe I finally turned into myself. There was silence, not angry, not cold, just heavy. Then she said, I hope you know she talks about you a lot. She misses how things used to be. I don't, I said gently. I miss peace more. When I hung up, I felt no guilt. Just a strange ache that sat somewhere between sadness and acceptance. Love changes shape over time. Sometimes it shrinks until all that's left is distance. That afternoon I went into town. The air was crisp, the streets still slick from rain. I stopped at the bakery where the owner, a kind woman named Ruth, always greeted me with a warm smile. "Morning, Linda. Haven't seen you in a while," she said, tying up a bag of bread. "Trying to stay quiet," I replied. Ruth laughed. "A little quiet never hurt anyone." I paid, and as I turned to leave, she lowered her voice. "Saw your sister last week. She looked tired." I nodded. "She's going through something." Ruth tilted her head. "Family's complicated. But you're a good soul, Linda. Always have been." That word, good, used to make me uncomfortable. It used to mean useful. But now it meant steady. I smiled, thanked her, and walked home under the pale sun, carrying the scent of fresh bread and rain. When I got home, a small envelope was waiting in the mailbox. My name on the front. Her handwriting again. The same hurried loops I could recognize anywhere. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single folded note. "I'm sorry for what I said. I didn't mean it. You've always been the strong one. I didn't know how much I depended on you until I lost you. I'm trying now. But it's hard." No signature. Just that. I sat on the porch steps, the wood still damp beneath me, reading the letter over and over. My hands trembled, not from anger this time, but from the weight of something I couldn't name. Regret, maybe. Or relief. Because behind those words, I finally heard what I'd been waiting for all these years. Acknowledgement. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was truth. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it inside the old recipe book on the shelf. The one we used to fight over when we were girls, each claiming to make the better pie. Funny how time turns rivalry into reflection. Days passed, and for a while things were calm again. Then small things began to shift. Whispers, side glances. It started at church. After service, a few women approached me, kind smiles hiding curious eyes. "Linda," one of them said, "your sister mentioned you two aren't speaking. That must be so hard." I smiled politely. Not as hard as pretending nothing happened. They nodded, murmured something about family being everything, then drifted away. Later at the grocery store I overheard my name again. "Poor thing," someone whispered near the cereal aisle. "Her sister said she's changed. Doesn't even help family anymore." I didn't turn around. I just kept walking. Let them talk. Let them think I'd turned cold. They didn't see the years of unpaid debts, the late-night tears, the invisible sacrifices. They only saw the ending, not the long, quiet middle that broke me. That's what people never see, the kindness that came before the boundary. That night my neighbor Mrs. Hall came by with a jar of jam. "You've been on my mind," she said softly. "People talk, but I know you. You've always been the one holding everyone else up." Her words almost made me cry. Not because they were kind, but because they were rare. We sat on the porch for an hour, sipping tea and listening to the crickets. She told me about her own sister, how she hadn't spoken to her in 10 years after a fight over their parents' house. "It's funny," she said, "how we keep expecting people to change just because we forgive them." I nodded. Forgiveness doesn't fix character. It just frees us from it. Mrs. Hall smiled sadly. "You're stronger than you think." When she left, I stayed outside, watching the moon rise over the rooftops. Somewhere out there, my sister was probably staring at the same sky, trying to figure out where things had gone wrong. The next morning brought a different kind of surprise. My niece showed up. She looked older, quieter. Not the bright, chatty girl I used to know. She stood on the porch, clutching a small bag. "Mom doesn't know I'm here," she said quickly. "I just wanted to see you." I smiled softly and opened the door. "Come in, sweetheart." She stepped inside, eyes darting around the house as if searching for ghosts of old memories. "It feels the same," she said. "It is the same," I replied. "Only quieter." We sat at the kitchen table and she told me everything. How the bills piled up, how her mother was trying but failing, how pride kept her from asking anyone else for help. "I don't know what to do anymore," my niece whispered. "She's angry all the time." I reached across the table, taking her hand gently. "You just keep being kind," I said. Kindness is the one thing that survives the noise. Her eyes filled with tears. I miss how things used to be. So do I said softly. But sometimes peace costs the version of love we used to know. She nodded slowly, understanding more than her age should have allowed. When she left, she hugged me tightly, tighter than I expected. Don't hate her, she whispered. I don't, I said. I just stopped helping her break me. That evening I sat alone again, watching the last light fade across the living room wall. The house felt different now, not lonely but settled. Like it finally belonged to me again. I opened my journal, the one I'd started months ago, and wrote. They don't see the years I gave, the nights I cried, the times I said yes when I wanted to say no. They only see the day I stopped. I closed the book and set it beside the lamp. The light flickered once before steadying. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying a faint echo of laughter from somewhere down the street. Not hers, but close enough to stir an old ache. So I didn't flinch. I had built too much silence to let it collapse now. Later that night, my phone buzzed again. A single message. Thank you for everything you did. I know you won't say it back, but I needed you to know. No name, but I didn't need one. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then I whispered, I already knew. I set the phone down and let the dark fill the room. For once, it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. I stared at the phone until the screen went black. Then I placed it on the table and listened to the silence wrap itself around the house. It wasn't empty anymore. It was complete. For the first time in years, I didn't need an apology to feel at peace. Outside, the wind pressed against the windows, carrying the chill of late November. The calendar on the wall reminded me what week it was. Thanksgiving again. A whole year had passed. 1 year since the table, the insult, the quiet smile that changed everything. I ran my finger over the date, half amused, half nervous. I hadn't hosted since then. Every year before, my house had been the center of it all. Laughter, noise, the smell of turkey and baked apples. This time I hadn't sent invitations, hadn't planned a thing. Still, part of me expected the phone to ring for someone to say, we'll come by like old times. No one did. Thanksgiving morning arrived gray and cold. The neighborhood smelled faintly of cinnamon and wood smoke. I brewed coffee and stood by the window, watching cars packed with pies and casseroles head toward someone else's celebration. The phone stayed silent until noon. Then it rang once, twice. I almost didn't answer. But the display name stopped me. Emily. I picked up. Hello. Hi, Aunt Linda, she said softly. Happy Thanksgiving. Her voice had grown steadier, older somehow. Happy Thanksgiving, sweetheart. How are you? I'm okay, she said. Mom's been better. She got a part-time job at the school office. Things are still tight, but she's trying. I smiled. That's good to hear. She wants to see you, Emily added. She's been talking about last year. She said if she could redo that night, she would. I looked at the quiet table behind me, just one plate, one cup, one candle flickering. Some nights don't need redos, I said. They just need to stay lessons. Emily hesitated. We're driving by your area today. Could we stop for a minute? Just to say hello. My heart paused. Not from fear but from something softer, like forgiveness tapping on the door it once broke down. Yes, I said finally. Just for a minute. 2 hours later, a familiar car pulled into my driveway. I watched from the window as they stepped out. My sister, thinner than I remembered, her hair tucked under a worn scarf. Emily beside her, carrying a small foil-wrapped pie. They walked slowly toward the door. I opened it before they could knock. Hi, my sister said, her voice barely above the wind. Hi, I replied. For a long moment we just looked at each other. The months of silence stretched between us like a river that neither of us knew how to cross. Then Emily broke it by holding out the pie. Mom made it herself. My sister smiled weakly. It's apple. You always liked apple. I stepped aside. Come in. The warmth of the house seemed to surprise them. My sister looked around, eyes softening as she took in the familiar things. The old table, the worn couch, the photos on the wall. It smells the same, she murmured. Like cinnamon and coffee. It always did, I said. We sat at the table, just 3 plates this time. I poured coffee while she fidgeted with her napkin. Emily filled the silence with small talk about school, the weather, anything to keep the air from thickening again. Finally, my sister spoke. I didn't come here for money, she said. I know you don't believe that, but I didn't. I nodded slowly. Then why? To say thank you, she whispered. For stopping me. For letting me fall hard enough to realize how far I'd drifted. Her voice shook, but her eyes didn't. They were steady, honest in a way I'd never seen before. I was so used to you fixing everything, she continued. You were like a safety net I didn't have to earn. When you cut me off, I thought you were cruel. But you were right, I was drowning everyone around me. My throat tightened. You hurt me, I said quietly. I know, she answered. And I hate that I did. The words landed like the first warm rain after a long winter. Not loud. Just real. We ate the pie in silence. It was sweet and imperfect, the crust uneven, the filling too tart. But I finished every bite. Afterward, Emily went to wash the dishes. My sister stayed seated, staring at her cup. Do you ever wish things could go back to how they were? She asked. I smiled faintly. No. I think we'd just repeat the same mistakes. She nodded. Probably. Outside, the wind had quieted. The gray clouds were thinning, letting streaks of late-day sunlight fall across the room. It made the dust on the old picture frames sparkle like tiny confessions. She followed my gaze to one of the photos. The two of us as girls standing in the yard with matching ribbons. She reached out and touched the frame. I was always jealous of you, she admitted. You were calm. People listened to you. I thought if I talked louder I'd matter more. I let out a small laugh. And I thought if I stayed quiet I'd keep the peace. For the first time in years we both smiled at the same truth. As evening settled I made them tea. The three of us sat together while the light faded. There were no grand speeches, no dramatic apologies, just quiet understanding. Then as they stood to leave, my sister took my hand. I can't fix everything, she said. But maybe I can start small. She pulled an envelope from her coat pocket and placed it on the table. For Emily's next semester. I sold some things. It's not much, but it's mine this time. I looked at her, really looked. There was no pride in her face now, no superiority, just effort. For the first time I saw my sister not as a rival or burden, but as a woman trying to grow. I covered her hand with mine. Keep it, I said. You earned it. And so did she. She blinked, confused. But I don't want repayment, I said softly. I just wanted accountability. You've given me that. Her eyes shimmered. Thank you. Those two words, spoken without excuses, were the only repayment I ever needed. They left just after sunset. I stood at the doorway as they walked to the car, the headlights cutting through the dusk. My sister turned once, gave a small wave. It wasn't dramatic, just honest. When their car disappeared around the corner, I closed the door and leaned against it. The house was quiet again, but this time it wasn't the silence of absence. It was peace, the kind that hums low and steady, like the sound of forgiveness settling into the walls. Later that night I poured myself a final cup of tea and sat by the window. Across the street, other houses glowed with laughter and clinking dishes. I didn't envy them anymore. My Thanksgiving had been small, but it was enough. I opened my journal and wrote, "Peace isn't the absence of family. It's the presence of boundaries that still allow love to breathe." I closed the book, set it aside, and let my thoughts wander back to the first Thanksgiving. The sharp words, the smile I wore as I pressed cancel. I didn't regret it. Sometimes love needs a shock to wake it from its own blindness. The fire in the hearth crackled softly. I reached for my shawl and pulled it around my shoulders. A faint knock startled me, not the door this time but the window. I turned to see Mrs. Hall outside, waving. She held a small plate wrapped in foil. I opened the window just enough for her to hand it through. "Pumpkin pie," she said. "Thought you might like a slice." "Thank you," I said, smiling. "You didn't have to." "Neither did you," she replied with a wink. "But sometimes doing the hard thing saves everyone." She walked back home under the streetlight glow, and I stood there a while, the cool air brushing my face. I sat back down, took a bite of the pie, and let the sweetness fill the quiet. The taste was warm, forgiving. A reminder that life, like dessert, didn't need to be perfect to be good. My eyes drifted to the empty chair across from me, the one my sister used to fill with her laughter, her sharp remarks, her chaos. Tonight it wasn't empty. It was open. For the first time I whispered, "Thank you." Not to her, not to anyone else, to myself. For finally learning that letting go wasn't losing. It was living. The wind eased, the candle burned low, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang the hour. I stood, turned off the lights, and walked down the hallway toward my room, each step steady, grounded, free. The house exhaled one final sigh as I closed the door behind me. And in that quiet, I knew this was the last Thanksgiving I would ever spend haunted by the past. It was also the first one I truly owned. If this story touched your heart, subscribe for more emotional stories of betrayal, revenge, and redemption. Like, share, and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from tonight?